Most gardeners keep replanting the same annual vegetables every single year, exhausting their soil, buying more seed and, well, wondering why yields keep slipping. They'll blame weather, pests, or bad seed, but the real problem is this. They're building a garden that resets to zero every spring. When you rely entirely on annuals, you're constantly disturbing the soil, breaking fungal networks and burning time you don't get back. If you're serious about growing food long-term, you need backbone crops, perennials. The kind medieval growers depended on because replanting acres by hand wasn't practical. Today we have rototillers and seed catalogues, but the principle hasn't changed. Plant once, manage properly, and harvest for years. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel now. This is the kind of practical growing knowledge that compounds over time, just like a well-built perennial bed. Let's start with the crop that should already be in your garden. Asparagus is one of the highest return crops you can plant. Most people hesitate because it takes too long. That's short-term thinking. I've got asparagus crowns that have been producing for over a decade in the same raised bed. I plant 1-year crowns in trenches about 20 centimeters deep, spacing them 30 to 40 centimeters apart. I backfill gradually as they grow, not all at once. In a 1.2 meter by 2.4 meter raised bed, you can comfortably fit 12 to 16 crowns, and once established, that bed will give you several kilos of spears every spring. What most gardeners get wrong is harvesting too early. The first year after planting, don't harvest at all. The second year, harvest lightly for about 2 weeks. From year 3 onward, you can harvest for 6 to 8 weeks, stopping when spears get thinner than a pencil. Feed heavily with compost, at least 5 centimeters layered over the bed each autumn, and keep soil pH around 6.5 to 7. If you're running hydroponics, asparagus is possible but inefficient. It's far better suited to permanent soil beds where roots can go deep and stable. Rhubarb is practically indestructible if you treat it right. Rhubarb is another medieval staple that modern gardeners overlook. It thrives in cooler climates and tolerates partial shade. Plant crowns in early spring with buds just at soil level, spacing them about 90 centimeters apart. One mature plant can produce 3 to 5 kilos of stalks per season. The mistake people make is starving it. Rhubarb is a heavy feeder. I top dress with well-rotted manure or compost twice a year and keep the soil consistently moist but not waterlogged. In raised beds, make sure you've got at least 40 centimeters of depth. In hydro systems, it's rarely worth the nutrient space. Rhubarb needs dormancy and cold cycles to perform properly. Good King Henry deserves a comeback in serious gardens. You won't find this one in supermarkets. Good King Henry was a medieval perennial green used like spinach and asparagus combined. It establishes slowly, but once settled, it produces edible shoots in spring and leafy greens through the season. Plant seeds or divisions about 45 centimeters apart in well-drained soil with moderate fertility. It tolerates poorer soils better than spinach, and it doesn't bolt under heat the same way. I grow it along the edge of a perennial bed where it gets morning sun and afternoon shade. Harvest lightly the first year. From year 2 onward, you can cut outer leaves continuously. It's not flashy, but it fills the hungry gap when annual greens haven't matured yet. Sorrel gives you reliable greens when nothing else does. Sorrel is one of the most dependable perennial greens I grow. It pushes out leaves early in spring and keeps going into autumn. The lemony flavor is strong, but mixed with milder greens, it's excellent. Space plants 30 centimeters apart, divide every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor. If you're running small backyard beds, dedicate one corner permanently to sorrel and other perennial greens. In hydroponics, sorrel performs well in deep water culture because it tolerates consistent moisture and moderate nutrient strength. Around 1.2 to 1.6 EC works well in my systems. Jerusalem artichokes will outproduce potatoes with less work. Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes are almost too productive. Plant tubers 10 to 15 centimeters deep, spacing them 40 centimeters apart in rows. They'll grow 2 to 3 meters tall and produce heavily in autumn. Here's the trade-off. They spread aggressively. If you plant them, contain them. I grow mine in a dedicated 1 meter by 3 meter bed with root barriers. Harvest after frost for sweeter flavor. Leave a few tubers in the ground and they'll regrow without replanting. They tolerate poor soil better than potatoes and require far less input once established. In hydroponics, they're not practical due to size and tuber development needs. Soil is king here. Horseradish is a long-term flavor crop with serious resilience. Plant a single root cutting and honestly you'll likely have horseradish for life. Set root pieces at a 45-degree angle about 5 centimeters below the soil surface and space them 60 centimeters apart. It thrives in full sun, but, it tolerates partial shade as well. The key is controlled harvesting. Dig roots in late autumn after frost. If you leave even small root fragments, they'll regrow. That's either a benefit or a nuisance, depending on your management style. Personally, I dedicate a contained section of the garden to it, so it doesn't invade the vegetable beds. Now, sea kale is, in my opinion, one of the most underused perennial vegetables out there. Sea kale was grown in medieval coastal gardens, and honestly, it deserves more attention. It produces blanched spring shoots, similar to asparagus, and large edible leaves later in the season. Plant crowns about 60 centimeters apart in well-drained soil. It prefers sandy or loamy conditions and really good drainage is critical. In raised beds, you'll want to add coarse sand or fine gravel if your mix is heavy. To blanch shoots, just cover crowns with a bucket in early spring to exclude light. It takes patience the first year or two, but once established, it's low maintenance and highly productive. Now let's talk about managing perennial systems correctly. Perennials demand a different mindset. You don't rip everything out each season. You build soil gradually. I apply compost annually, mulch thickly, at least 5 to 8 centimeters, and avoid disturbing root zones. In a 10 square meter backyard plot, you can dedicate half to annual rotation and half to permanent perennials. Over time, you'll notice the perennial section becomes more stable, less prone to weeds, and more drought tolerant. In hydroponics, true perennials are, pretty limited. Systems are optimized for fast turnover crops. However, sorrel and certain perennial herbs perform well if you maintain stable nutrient levels and avoid overcrowding root systems. And once you're harvesting these crops, handle them properly. Whether you're cutting asparagus spears or blanching sea kale, internal temperature matters for quality if you're cooking or preserving. I use the ThermoPro TP620 instant read thermometer in my kitchen to avoid overcooking delicate harvests. It gives a fast reading, has a large rotating display, and it's waterproof, which, let's be honest, matters when you're working around sinks and produce. If you want to check it out, the link is in the description. It's not essential for growing, but it does help you respect what you've grown. The bigger picture is this. Perennial crops change your workload. Instead of starting from scratch each season, you're managing living infrastructure. You're investing in root systems that reach deeper, access nutrients annuals never touch, and stabilize your soil biology. Over 5 years, the difference in labor and yield stability is, honestly, noticeable. Medieval growers didn't choose these crops because they were trendy. They chose them because they reduced risk. Crop failure from bad weather hits annuals hard. Perennials with established roots are more resilient. If you're serious about food security, flavor, and long-term soil health, start integrating perennial vegetables now. Even 2 or 3 of these crops will shift your garden from seasonal effort to sustained production. Subscribe to the channel if you value this kind of grounded, experience-based growing advice. Share this video with another gardener who's tired of replanting the same beds every year. The goal isn't just to grow food, it's to build systems that get better with time.